Welcome back to Insights at DDLynn Designs, a unique twist in the ancient art of wire. This is DDLynn, and I'm excited to show you these they're really easy, super beginner friendly spiral earrings. I also made a pendant to match, and how I basically did that is I made 3 of the same thing, but then I took this wave wire here and I bent it over so that all you got to do, and it's hammered so it's got a really cool look, all you got to do is slip your clasp through it and loop it off on the back. So just want to give you some inspiration of how you can take off on spiral designs. You can also make one hook and clasp out of this entire design. So it would be one solid piece, and all you would do is, let me show you. On this one, I made a drop hook. Or a drop, I guess it's kind of like a hook, but it's a drop loop. So over here, you would keep the wire straight and you would double it over and you would make yourself a hook. So maybe I'll show you guys how to do that later. So you would have a complete hook and clasp that you could use for a necklace or a bracelet. It's really endless what you can do with this particular design. You can add to it or not, meaning on here, I added some half round wire just down on the bottom just to give it a little bit of a different look. I also spiraled my ear hooks. I make all my ear hooks. So before we get started, please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to hit that bell so you know when my tutorials are coming out next. And I'd really appreciate your comments and feedback. And please give me a thumbs up if you like my video, my tutorial, and it takes 1 second to do so. So let's get started. So I've already prepared one of my earrings, and I've stopped at the spiral. So you're going to cut yourself 2 pieces of 7 to 7¼ inches of round or square wire. I have already marked my wire, and I've marked it exactly 3 inches down from the top. And the reason why I've marked it is so that you know where to stop with your spiral. And if you're new to wire wrapping, I'm always going to take my time and be very detail oriented. You might want to get in the habit of marking your wire. And spirals can be a little frustrating at first for some people. I did a class last year here locally and found a lot of people got really frustrated with them. So I'll try to be very patient about that. On this earring, this is a 3-inch. We're going to be making a 2-inch today. I hammered it with texture after I hammered it and arced out the sides, so you can do that as well. So let's move these out of the way. And you might want to pre-make your beads. So on this set, I've already wrapped my beads, and there's many different ways to wrap your beads. So these are, God, I can't remember the name of them. Moss agate, they're really pretty. Beautiful little moss agate beads. And as you can see on this one, I wrapped my wire around the top like I did on these, but instead of cutting it, I brought it all the way around the bottom and made a spiral down here. So today, once you learn how to make the spirals, if you're new to wire wrapping, you would do the same concept for this and then run your wire through your bead and wrap it on the top. And maybe I'll do a wrapping bead tutorial on different ways to wrap beads. You guys let me know what you want to see. So let's move this all out of the way so we don't have any distractions. And so I'm working now with my 7¼ inch. It can be 7 inches. It depends on how big you want your spiral. So let me back up here a little bit. As you notice, the spirals are much different on these. So this one is bigger, and I used a 16 gauge square on this. So if you're going to get really big with your spirals, you don't want to do a really light wire, meaning like a 20 gauge, because it'll have a tendency to separate on you, which is why I'm doing 18 gauge. If you're making a tiny little spiral, I use 20 gauge for my ear hooks. And let me see, here you go. Got that all attached. So that's no problem. using a 20 gauge for your ear hook for making a little tiny spiral. And I wanted to give you more inspiration. I'm sure you've noticed my ring. So this is a twisted square wire that I did a spiral ring with. And again, let me know if you'd like to see a tutorial on this. And here's another concept of spirals. The spiral is the spiral of life, the circle of life. And I used a copper washer on this and I hammered it. And then I brought my wires around, and I'll show you, 3 times, and I hammered the dickens out of those. And as you can see underneath, my wires are crossing over each other, coming through the hole of where the washer is, and then I started wrapping them around each other. And this is quite fiddly to do this because that washer is moving all over the place when you do this design. So let me know, give me your feedback. So, okay. So you know I already started with one, and you guys, I'm working really hard to stay in frame, and I'm excited about getting my new phone. So the first thing that you want to do is make a very small loop, very, very small loop. And then you want to bring it in as close as you can. And here's a little tip. You want to trim this inside end. So you want to trim that, and you want to use a flat nose or a more heavy duty wire. If you've been watching my channel now, you know I use these Xuron flat nose a lot. They're girthy and they're more heavy duty, so they tend not to slip off your wire easily when you're working with very tiny little pieces, and you don't have to use as much pressure. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to squeeze that in, and I'm rolling on the wire as I'm squeezing this in because I want a closed spiral. So let me stop here so that you can see that. And let me get my ring off. I think that's going to be a distraction with the camera, and it's going to try to focus on it. So once you've made your little bitty spiral or your closed loop, I'm going to go in the best working direction for myself, and you're going to work very close to the wire, and it's kind of like a push or roll. So I am using, good pressure. I'm clasping my pliers on the arc of my little spiral there, and I'm going to turn it in. And you're going to need some, strength to do that. And you see that little bit of gap there? So all I'm going to do before I keep turning my spiral in is I'm going to squeeze it in even more. And see how it kind of popped and twisted up on itself? Don't worry about that. All we're going to do is just flatten it down. And if it has nicks, no problem, we'll buff those out. And now I'm going to start the spiral process as I'm turning it into itself. And again, I marked my wire up here. I'm staying very close to my wire, letting the wire brace against the length of my finger, and I'm just turning my wrist in. I think I'm coming up to my mark here, and before I go any further, I want to match it up to this one. So it looks like we're pretty spot on. Let's take a look. I could go just a smidge more for me. So now, if those wire marks bother you, I want to show you a really cool technique. If you've followed me already, then you know I use a file a lot, and I love the texture that the file creates, and it also takes out any nicks in your wire. And this is a 180 grit fingernail file, and I've had it a long, long time. So if that bothers you, you're just going to go ahead and file that out. So let's do this one. Now, if you don't like that brushed, because it gives it a kind of a brushed copper look, you can get a buffer And I use professional sanding blocks, and these are 180 grit as well. I used to buy fingernail blocks, but I don't anymore because they don't last. These are professional. Your construction workers will buy these. They last a whole lot longer because they've got more of that sandpaper on it. So you can just go ahead and go in and buff your spiral. Now, if you have an open swirl in the middle, don't worry about it. That's fine as well. There's a technique I use that I leave the center open because I'm going to attach it as a link. And I'm going to show you some ideas of what you can do with spirals with jewelry. And the spiral has been around before mankind. Check out the spiral of life and how all things are connected. So, fractal. All right, so now this is important. When we're making our earrings, we want to make sure that when we bend our wire, that they're going in opposite directions of each other, not in, I'm just going to turn this over just so you see what I'm talking about, not in the same direction. We want them to be matching, but we want them to be opposing. So one of the spirals is going to the left and the other spiral is going to the right, so that it gives you nice matching but balanced earrings. Same thing on the bottom. So let me show you, when you make your beads, if you're going to do a spiral bead, you want them to be in opposite directions. So just wanted to give you a little hint there. So I'm going to turn these over and it'll make sense when you see what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring my wire up. Just going to bring it straight up on a 90. So you should have something like that. And I'm going to do the same thing on this one. I'm going to bring it straight up on a 90. Now this will keep you from getting confused if you do both your pieces at the same time, so that now you can see when I bend my wire over, they're in the opposite direction. So that way it sets up in your mind already, okay, I got to do these in the opposite direction. So make sure that they're in the opposite direction. You could get caught up and, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's the right word, and start bending both the wires like this, and they'll be in both the same direction. So you want to make sure that you keep them down like this so that you don't confuse it. Now, you have two options. You can either make a loop on the bottom, like I did on this one, or on these, I didn't make a loop. I actually folded the wire back right at where I bent it. So it's up to you what you want to do. Now, since I made these flush, meaning there's no loop on the bottom, you're still going to drop your bead down, okay? I'm going to do these with a little bit of a loop on the bottom. So you can use round nose or flat nose or petite nose. So I'm going to use my petite nose. I'm going to make sure that I keep these in the opposite direction down here. And let's see the best way for me to show you guys how to do this, because I don't want a big loop. I just want a little loop. So I'm coming pretty close to the neck. So I'm going to turn it over, and I'm simply going to bend my wire straight over. And it's centered in the middle of that spiral. So you should have something like this. And see, now we've got this little drop loop, where here we don't. So it really depends on your preference, okay? So we're going to do the same thing here, and I've got my wire setting where I want it to so I don't confuse myself and turn it around. So I'm just going to be right at the neck. Then let me just turn it over so I can get in a good working position. Your wrist will only turn so far. And I'm going to bend it straight over my spiral. So you should have something like this, and they are exactly in the opposite direction. So I'm going to turn them around so you can see what I'm talking about. Isn't that cute? Just so cute. So now we're almost done, you guys. It's pretty easy. The hardest part might be shaping your wire into this wave right here. Might be a little tricky at first, but just give yourself some time and patience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my 6-step bail making pliers, and I'm going to use the number 4. So I'm going to put my pliers right at the neck. And I know I'm really close. I wish I could jack up my camera right now, but I can't. So I'm right at the neck where the spiral is touching both my barrels, and I'm just going to swing it halfway over. And you can make your wave as wavy as you want. I'm going to turn my pliers around. I'm going to come right at where the curve comes out between the barrels. So my 4th step is facing to my left. And you can come closer if you want and make tiny, tiny waves. I'm going to make mine a little bit further apart, and I'm going to do a half step or a half turn around that. Then I'm going to turn my pliers around, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now the 4th barrel is facing to my right, and I'm just going to swing that around. And if you don't want them super long, you can stop right here. I'm going to be making a 2-inch. So I'm turning my pliers around. And you want to make sure, so here's a little tip, that you stay straight on that wire. You don't want it in there like this. So you want to stay straight on that wire where that curve is coming out. And I'm going to rock it over. So you want to keep in line. Do you see how we're trying to keep in line here? And then I'm going to do the same thing one more time, and I'm going to put it right on the curve. So here's my curve right here, and I'm just going to push that wire over. And there's our first one. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to put my pliers in to where my spiral is flush against the 2 barrels, and I'm going to bend it over about halfway. Then I'm going to turn my pliers around where my arc is coming out a little bit right here, and I'm just going to bend it over so it's like halfway. Then I'm just going to turn my pliers around and bend it over. And do that again. Turn my pliers around and bend it over. And I'm going to do one more. Turn my pliers around and bend it over. So now you should have 2 wavy wires. So you just want to make sure that they're straight and lined up. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop our bead, or we can actually hammer first. So let's do that first. So before I even hammer, we're going to straighten out this top wire. And you can keep going, or you can actually, I've done them where I brought the wire, I used about, I think it was 9.5 inches. And so I brought the wire back down and swung it underneath and then brought it over. And so I kind of made like a double wave or a double zigzag, if you can get that idea. So this is what I mean by, doing spirals. Not spirals, but embellishing on it, constantly changing up your design. So let's go ahead and straighten this out. And I want to make sure I'm staying in frame here. So I'm going to come off this line here, and I want to make sure that my wave is sitting center over my spiral. And am I in frame? I am, and it's not. So I'm going to straighten it out in the back. I can see that it's cocked off to the side a little bit. So I'm just going to straighten that out so it's nice and center. Then I'm going to line it up on my straight line on my mat, and I'm going to square up the top here. Let me see if I can scooch this down so you can see what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to bend this over. I know my hand's kind of in the way. I don't know any other way to show it. Maybe if I mark it. Let me mark it, you guys. That'll be easier. That way I can show you. So I'm going to put that one there, and I'm going to do the same thing here with this one. It's not lining up, so let me just make a couple corrections here. So I'm going to mark this one right here at the top, and this will be easier for you to see than me doing it on the mat, because I realize my hand will be in the way in the mat. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten out this wire. So I'm going to come on the line. You can come on the bottom or the top. I'm going to come on the bottom, and I'm just going to straighten that up. So there's what you should have. And if it's off, we can correct that. Not a problem. Just move it around a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to come at the bottom of that mark, and I'm going to straighten it up. So you see how they're going in the opposite directions? Now, if you find that they're not perfectly matching, which they're not going to be absolutely perfect, or you want a fatter, meaning more wider wave here, you can just get your pliers. So remember, we use the 4th step on here, and you can come down if you wanted to the 5th step, that's the 6th, and put your pliers in there and just soften that out a little bit. And do the same thing over here. We're just going to soften that out a little bit. Just depends on how deep you want your wave. Oops, wrong side. Soften that out a little bit. I'm just giving it a gentle push. There we go. So now we have 2 matching. So we're going to go ahead and cut these. Let's get all this paraphernalia out of the way. And then we're going to hammer them. So I'm going to cut at the top of the mark. And the same thing over here. Let's just match them up so that they're the same length. And that looks pretty good to me. So we have our 2 earrings. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hammer them. And we're going to hammer the arc. So, which is this side or this side. You're going to do both, actually. So I'm going to get my chasing hammer, and this is a flat chasing hammer. And I'm just going to gently start hammering away, because I want to widen out that wave right there. Then I'm going to slide this down and do the same thing over here. Then I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing over here. You don't have to hammer it if you don't want to. So there's one. That's a little off. So I'm just going to straighten it out a little bit. Just a couple tweaks. So we're going to do the same thing, whoops, on this one. It's also going to harden your wire so that this earring doesn't bend. That's why I don't use 20 gauge when I'm making these wave earrings. I've made wave bracelets because I don't want them to bend. So the hammering is going to harden the wire. So let's take a look, see what we got going here. That looks pretty good to me. So now, before we close them off, we're almost done. Let me get all this paraphernalia out of the way. As I mentioned, I already wrapped my beads. So I'm going to slide my little bead down. So there's my beautiful little moss agate. And same thing over here. Just slide it down. Now you could start embellishing on this, or you're going to want to make yourself 3. I need to turn that bead around because the cut wire was in the front where I cut that wire. So you want to be mindful about, if you just cut your wire like I did, make sure that the cut, and it's not on this one either, is in the back. So let's bring this little baby out and turn it back around. There we go. Aren't those cute? I love those little moss agates. Really, really pretty. You could actually add beautiful little crystal beads all the way up this. So I'm just trying to give you a lot of inspiration and ideas of how you can take off on this. So you know that you could use longer wire and then cross it over and bring it back down and make an earring out of that. You could wrap wire around this, add beads. I mean, it's wherever your imagination is going to take you. Now my spiral is twisting, not twisting, but rocking in a little too far to the right for me, so I'm just going to rock it back. So now we're going to close these off. So you can use your 6-step bell making pliers, or round nose pliers. I'm going to use the number 1 step because it's an earring. I don't want a big loop. And I'm just going to roll that in to itself. So it should look like that. And I'll close that off. So we've got one. And the same thing over here. I'm using my number 1 and I'm just going to roll it in to itself. So let's take a look. And then all we're going to do is add hooks. Aren't those adorable? They're just so cute. And again, if you don't want them this long, then just don't make as many waves. Just do 2 waves or 3 waves. So we did 1, 2, 3, 4 waves. So maybe just do 3 waves, and that will give you, let me tell you how long. With the bead drop, that'll give you, these are going to be about 2 1/4. That'll give you about just a little underneath an inch. If you make your, an 1 3/4 inches. If you make your spiral bigger, then of course you can shorten this up or not to make a shorter earring if you want more spiral on it. So let me go ahead and close these off and make sure that they're squared up. So there's one, and I'm just going to close this one off. And there's 2. Aren't they cute? So I've already pre-made my ear hooks, and I did a little tiny baby spiral on them. So let's see, I always get confused which way to go on these. I think I go, it doesn't matter, I'll figure it out if they're not in the right direction. So that is not in the right direction. And the way that that hook is on there, I'm going to have to move that around. So I need this. I need my loop here. Either 2 things you can do. If you just want to immediately attach your ear hook, it cannot be in the same direction, meaning the loop on it, as this. It has to be in the opposite direction. So if you want to attach your ear hook, you can just simply turn this to where it's horizontal. Okay, so you just turn it to the side, or you can just leave it as it is and add a little jump ring and add your ear hook. So I'm going to turn mine to the side. So I'm going to hold this firmly right here. I'm going to get myself some flat nose, and I'm going to turn it to the side because I don't want any more things hanging off my earring. So let me show you what I mean. So now when I slip my ear hook in, it's hanging evenly. And I think that's the wrong way, but nope, it's the right way. You see what I mean? So now you've got your little spiral on top, and it just makes for a really cute look. Or you can add a jump ring. Or when you're making your loop up here, you can do it in that direction. When you're making your loop, just make it in that direction. I hope I'm making sense, you guys. So on this one, it's the same thing. I'm going to hold this way firmly, and I'm going to turn, I hope you can see this. I'm going to turn this sideways. And the reason why I'm holding my wires, I don't want to bend the rest of my piece. And let's see if it's squared up. It did. So I'm going to rock this back a little bit. It's coming in towards the left too much for me. There we go. So let's see what we got going here. And I actually wanted that in the opposite direction. So I'm going to turn that around. I don't want them going in the same direction. So I'm just simply going to hold very closely here. I'm going to turn it around, all the way around. There we go. And close it up. So you'll see what I mean here in a minute. I need to rock that back because it pushed it to the right. So I can just simply do this and rock it back. And let's see. And that loop got a little small, so it's really good that these things happen. So I'm